So today we are going to have Hillary take us through the role of self-help groups in community development, something that he has been doing for quite some time. And Hillary is the founder and CEO of Restorative Seed Society organization, which is one of our partnering NGOs. And the NGO works to contribute to the realization of the SDGs and promote community development in business development, education, and environment. He has enormous expertise in youth development, having worked in several rural and urban communities and schools with stakeholders such as the district assemblies and partners like WaterAid Ghana, USAID, UNICEF, and others. He's also an author and a member of the Ghanaian Association of Writers, a fellow of the Young African Leaders Initiative, and vice chairman of AFRIAN Ghana, the Ghana chapter of a continental network of youth organizations focused on population and development issues affecting youth under the auspices of UNFPA. He's also the founder of Fine Line Concepts, a business consulting firm that provides business advisory services to many businesses. He holds a BSc in Earth Science, a certificate in small business management from the Accra Business School, and he's currently pursuing a Master's in Philosophy in Environmental Science at the University of Ghana. So he has quite an experience, and Larry, you're much welcome to take us through the topic. So we're going to have the presentation for the first 30 minutes. And then after there, we're going to have a Q&A session, after which we are going to end the Facebook Live, and we can proceed to share knowledge or our experiences of how we deal with self-help groups or other alternatives, and then conclude the meeting. So you're most welcome, everyone, and Hillary, you can take us further. Thank you. Feel free to share your questions on chat, and Joanna, my colleague, is going to consolidate them. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm sure you can all hear me loud and clear. May you allow me to share my screen?
Yes, Hillary, you're good to go.
Okay, good. I guess my screen is loading now. Okay, so thank you very much once again. As Martha has mentioned, looking at the role of self-help groups in community development, as we all are involved here. Okay, so my presentation will look at the following outline. So a bit about what we do and what we mean by self-help groups, their importance and functions, the benefits, and what other stakeholders can do. And then we will look at some case studies also. And then we will have a discussion from there. Okay, so Restorative Seed Society is a local NGO, which I founded with some other colleagues while we were students in the university. So the idea of Restorative Seed Society started around 2007. We actually got working as an NGO in 2011. And by 2012, I had fully taken over and I have been working there since. So since our inception, we have been operating as a social enterprise. So what it means is that I had a business or some business ideas that I worked on more at a personal level, which provided funds for me to be able to do the things that I had to do on behalf of Restorative Seed Society. So somehow, because we did not have the needed funding and we did all these things by ourselves, we were exploring ways to make our work a lot more efficient. And then we discovered that in the communities, there are groups that already exist. And if we worked through them, we could drive change in the midst of the constraining resources that we had in the environment. So let me also mention that from around 2009, 2010, and 2011, Ghana in particular began to face limited access to funds, especially for NGOs. The space became quite tough, and that was a time that we were also emerging. So you can imagine that it was very difficult for us. And so the only way to survive was for us to integrate business ideas into what we did. So for instance, we had seminars for students to help them improve upon their grades as part of our education initiatives when we started. And we were asked, we encouraged students and parents to make small contributions, towards this, because we could not get the needed funding, but we also had to work. So that is how we started off. Okay, so as I said, we got to appreciate the importance of self-help groups in the work that we do. And so we began focusing on how we could tap the potential of these groups. So basically, what do we mean by self-help groups? It is not new to us all in the development space. But primarily, we are talking about a people that have set up, a group by themselves for economic and welfare, reasons. There are usually some other reasons also. But these are basically the reasons that engender the setting up of self-help groups. So as you know, it is the people themselves who have put these groups together to help them achieve a certain agenda. And once we did development work that related to what the people wanted to achieve, it was best to work through the self-help groups. So lately, when you go into our communities, we have the village savings and loan schemes, which is now more like a development term that we have given to the new paradigm of economic associations that are springing up in our communities. But we had groups like vigilante groups that communities set up themselves to go around in the night and make sure that theft issues and all that were stopped. There are also girls clubs in the community. There are football clubs. These are very common. Football clubs especially are very common in our communities among young boys. And growing up, we had all these groups that we worked with. And so I give you an example of what we did in 2020. In September 2020, we worked with the football clubs in the Bolgatanga area around issues of reproductive health. So the football clubs, boys and girls clubs together, they come together before training or after training to discuss reproductive health issues. We also use the stadiums. So in Bolgatanga, for instance, we have football clubs that are members of a coalition that we formed to sensitize communities on reproductive health issues, and also young people in particular. But traditionally, we had groups that we called Ananore. Ananore is a Frafra word, which means unity. So growing up, we had Ananore groups. We also had Alangube groups. Alangube means working together or communal work. So we had these groups when we were growing up, but primarily they were just women's groups, and they would come together to go and greet funerals. They will come together to support people in their naming ceremonies, and that kind of thing. And then also helping people on their farms. So these groups traditionally exist in our communities. So knowing that there is already a certain potential in the communities through which we can ensure the achievement of our development goals, self-help groups became how we could achieve our objectives as an NGO. So in communities where we entered and did not really find viable groups, we encouraged them to form their groups. And like I said, the idea has always been to allow the women or the community members themselves to be the people who will form the groups. And one of the things that we also do with these groups is that on their own, we teach them how to draw action plans. And they do their own action plans without us in those meetings. And then they present it to us. And we only serve as a facilitation group. So I can give you examples of how it picked up for one of our groups, where we had a group in Congo. There's a community called Congo in the Upper East region. It's in the Nabdam district. And so in Congo, for instance, we had a women's group that did their own action plan. In fact, they were their own action plans and took initiatives, including going to meet authorities in the local community school to discuss the welfare of their children and all that. So those are some of the things that we try to do to get the groups going. And let me just remind you that we did this, or we do this to ensure that the communities own the groups themselves. Maybe you may have these experiences in other countries also, where you go into a community, you tend to lead the initiative, and the communities consider it as your own. Government did a project a few years ago here in Ghana called the Savannah Accelerated Development Program. One of it was to plant trees, and some aspects of it also provided animals to the beneficiaries. Now, on inspection days, you only get to a community and then they say that, okay, your animals have died. But these were animals that were given to the people to take care of. Or they tell you your plants have died. But so it means that somehow the ownership of those projects were not well understood by the people. So it's one of the reasons why we do that. But let me just say that self-help groups are the new minds for community development and a tool for real emancipation of rural people that can return power back to the people. And we as NGOs can only support them, and not the way it looks presently, where we sometimes NGOs. So if we really want the true emancipation of the people, from our experience, I think that self-help groups are an important opportunity that already exists in many communities that we can take advantage of. What it only means is that in a few years, we may not look so important to the communities because they would have known how to do the thing. And probably that may be a fear that some NGOs may not want to venture in or encourage a lot more. But it is actually a big opportunity to emancipate communities through the use of self-help groups and reduce their dependence on NGOs, though there are some challenges that we will see as I go on. Okay, yeah, so basically, I mean, we know what community development stands for, but what is important is that every community and the way they consider what development is to them. And of course, that development must respect their values. It must be dignified, and then it must incorporate the opinions of those people. And that is one of the important things that as development practitioners, we always need to keep in mind. That the fact that you are going to a community to provide them support, that not mean that your support can or not take into consideration the values of the people. Now, another important point I would like to mention here is that when you walk into any community, for instance, get to understand what our values are. When you come into the township, but when you move into the communities, then you get to see the real people, the food we eat, the buildings we live in. These are the places where our culture is preserved. So what it means is that it is not difficult. I mean, it is so difficult to break through what the people have been practicing for years. Because what we call development in the cities is a departure from our community's DNA. Our buildings, our foods, and everything has been influenced by a certain kind of foreign culture. But to a large extent, our rural communities are our DNA as a people. You see a reflection of our true selves. And that is one of the things that we should keep in mind as development practitioners, that it will not be easy to go into any of these communities and put out ideas that seek to destroy a structure that they have preserved over time. But we can only help to improve what has been done. So for us, it's very important to work through self-help groups. And in all that we do, they are our key sources of consultation. Now, the reasons are these. Our society is so fragmented, that you cannot go into a community and be able to address everyone's needs. And so you go into a community, you have a project, and then it can result even in conflicts, which are unintended consequences. And we actually don't intend them. But sometimes they do happen because of the approach. So self-help groups, for us in our case, helps us marginalized groups in our work. So that is one of the things that self-help groups has helped us to address. Because as you know, you walk into a community and you have PWDs, you have girls, you have women, you have all sorts of people that make up the community, self-interest groups. And these days, there are groups all around our communities we call parliaments. And mostly they are groups of young boys or young men who have a shed where they go to sit and chat and do all sorts of things. And usually those parliaments are sponsored by politicians. So these are dynamics that are growing up in our community. Go into a parliament, for instance, you may be able to solicit views of people across board in the communities than forming a different group, and that parliament can stand against that group. So it's important that we understand how important self-help groups are that we can take advantage of. Now, one of the obvious benefits is the issue of the economic and financial benefits that it brings. In Ghana, interest rates are as high as 33% upwards. When it comes down, it comes to 28%. And there are no special packages for small, I am very much aware of that people can easily go into, So self-help groups have become that rallying point where women, especially, who are easy to organize in our cases, raise funds to support their initiatives. Yeah. So social cohesion. I think that one of the last things that any NGO would like is to go and do a project in a community which divides the community. So there are boreholes that have been put up in communities around Bogatanga that I know, and no one goes there because it is sited close to a certain clan, it is sited close to a certain faction of the community, and many other people will feel that they cannot go there to fetch water. So, there are quite a number of things that self-help groups can do, but one of these is the social cohesion and the bonding that it helps us to achieve as an NGO. And I'm sure that many others can also be able to take advantage of that. Okay, so basically, I think I have mentioned this. It's just a checklist for us to know so that we don't veer off the real focus of self-help groups. I talked about the issue of parliaments that are growing up. Somehow, these are a departure from the normal self-help groups that we have been talking about. So somehow they are not really giving the value, that self-help groups should give. So this is just a guide that it should be a group that supports in helping raise funds, skills development, and then most importantly also social welfare activities. So that's just a guide for us to know that if you want to facilitate the formation of self-help groups in a community, it should be targeted at addressing these areas or functioning to serve these areas. Yeah, and of course, the benefits are obvious. Poverty alleviation, women's empowerment, and then sustainable livelihoods. Okay, so I'll talk about the benefits I just mentioned above, and then also using these case studies. So there's a community in the Nabdam district, which is called Congo Daboring. So in 2016, in August 2016, thereabouts, to 2017, I was contracted by the Nabdam District Assembly to provide leadership and group formation training for a community in Congo, which is called Congo Dabori. So I went to this community the first time because I had a small contract from the district assembly, particularly it used to be called the NBSSI, which was the National Board for Small Scale Industries. The name has now been changed to the Ghana Enterprises Agency. So the Ghana Enterprises Agency works under the assembly in every district. And so I was given a number of communities in which to work. And I went to Congo Dabori. So the selection of the women, for instance, was done through the assembly members. Usually in Ghana, if you want to do any development work, there are elected local assembly members that you go to a community, you have to consult them first as part of the community entry. So when I went to the community, I was handed a list of different groups of, different people, women and men, a few men inclusive. Though now the group only exists with one man. So when I asked them whether they were in a group or they just came together from the community as being selected, it appeared that they had never been organized before. So we helped to organize the Congo Dabori group. Then, so we asked them to do their own elections at their own level. As part of my training days, there was a period when we closed, we allowed them, they stay alone, elect their leaders and that kind of thing. Then we took the leaders and the members through different kinds of trainings, including conflict resolution, holding meetings, keeping records, minutes for that matter. So as I speak to you, the Congo Dabori group became quite formidable after we had our meeting. It's been a few years on, but I'm still in touch with the group. So as time went on, the Congo Dabori group was able to mobilize some bit of money on their own through daily contributions. And fortunately, also, we had a small, and there was funds made available to augment the work that they were doing. So throughout 2017, this group, which was just an amalgamation of individuals from their community or from the Congo Dabori community, ended up becoming a formidable group that managed their funds for more than 1 year. And somehow there was some kind of respite that we felt. We didn't really feel the pressure of having to be going to the community, because once they had a fund that they were managing themselves, it was easy for them to be able to do some things, and once a while we just go around to make checks. So a number of the women raised money from that group and did their farming in Congo Dabori. The only unfortunate thing is that in 2017, some banks were collapsed, and that affected the management of the funds, because the money was eventually put in the bank, and then the bank that, and this was in Congo, GN Bank. The bank is called GN Bank. And unfortunately, in 2017, later in 2017, the bank was among a number of banks that were collapsed in Ghana. And so somehow that affected that initiative of the women. But that is just an example of people who came from an individual position. Then they decided to work together, and somehow they were able to push themselves to a certain point. And let me just mention that one day I was in Bonga, and then the women called me severally because they wanted to see me. So I responded, and this was around Christmas. And I think that, I mean, I didn't really know what they wanted to do, but they had some gifts that they had assembled as a group that they wanted to hand over to me. And it was quite an interesting ceremony, I should say, you know, that the people that should look up to you for support, you know, are the people who feel that because you have worked with them, they can support you, you know, in a way. So I think that was an interesting thing. And that's why I said that if we can work with self-help groups very well, they may not need us again. And I think that that can be a very good thing, that our communities can be independent and then they can chart their own development path. Because let me just mention that apart from the partnership that we have with Impact Direct, where we, the local NGOs, are participating or are actually the people coming out with the ideas from the communities. Many development or donors don't work that way. So what it will mean is that if we don't switch the way we work, with time, we may end up imposing things on the communities as we have been doing for long, because our donors want it to be done so. But if we can work through the community structures, like the self-help groups, empower them, and they take charge of their own development, then they can become the leaders in deciding exactly what they want in their communities. And I think that that can be an interesting thing. Now, just another point. This is a little bit different from the typical self-help groups that I'm talking about, but just trying to make the point of how a group can transform, you know, their community in a way that they did not imagine, by coming together and working together through their own elected leaders. So for instance, when we started off with Restorative Seed, we had what we call the Restorative Seed clubs. So many of them were focused on the environment. So it is the same idea. They go do their own elections, they decide who their leaders are, and then they draw an action plan of things that they can do without necessarily needing external support, which is what we always say. And we got groups of school children carrying out cleanup exercises in there's a hospital in Adongo called the War Memorial Hospital, you know. So it's not a typical self-help group, but somehow this group that we formed in the schools by allowing the students to do their own elections and get their own students, their own leaders, ended up taking initiatives that, you know, was quite heartwarming for the hospital that they went to do the cleaning in, for instance, you know. But just to talk more about another group of women that we have in a community called Waki. Waki is a community in the Talinsi district of the Upper East Region. So, so this is another group that I discovered not too long ago when I was doing a small study in the community among other communities. So while we had the discussions on the effects of climate change and all that, the community thought that, I started having discussions with some of the community leaders on what we could do for the women. And then I proposed the idea of what they could do for themselves by coming together. So this is one of our latest groups in Waki. Fortunately, also, I should say, one of our partners is supporting this group currently with a green grant. But one striking thing about this group is the fact that a few women having participated in a group discussion around the environment and all that, the impacts of climate change, and sharing their thoughts, and me making the proposal to them that they could begin to address these matters at their own level by coming together and ensuring that they had a way that they worked together. At least they started doing some work around farmer-managed natural regeneration, which is just one of the methods to restore dry lands. And fortunately, they got some support also, just a small green grant to help their activities. Yeah, so that's also about our group in Waki. So just quickly, one of the things that we have faced has always been the issue of leadership skills deficits, especially among the women groups. It has become difficult to have them volunteering to lead in their groups. It's been quite a difficulty because somehow they have been sidelined for a long time, so it becomes difficult for them. So one of the things that we have often done is just to provide training around issues of leadership. For instance, we had an occasion a few years ago where I was facilitating the group of these were weavers, you know, and then our regional minister was coming for this occasion. And as the moderator of the occasion, I should say, one of the things that I felt they could do was to take advantage of the presence of the regional minister to make a case. But I have this woman who works to me as the chairperson and says that she cannot talk and that I should talk for her or for them. And I insisted that I was not going to do it. Many of their group members thought that I should do it, but I insisted that I was not going to do it. And I don't think that in the end, she did bad, that I could have done better. So these are some of the challenges that sometimes we face, that they resist the leadership. They still want to be falling on you to be taking decisions. And that's quite a challenge for us in working with self-help groups. So somehow they still want you to be guiding them, which is sometimes a bit difficult. But just to say that there are also conflicts that also come up within the groups. And we do trainings around conflict resolution. We do exercises. And then we spend time to address some of the issues. We allow people to confide in us some of the issues. And I have had people who call me from the groups, and then they are able to tell me things that give me an idea how we can approach things when we are in the community. So conflicts are one of the things that comes up within these groups. And sometimes if you don't manage it well, it will disintegrate the group. And then also financial literacy gaps. Many of the communities, you go and you probably don't find someone who is literate to be able to keep simple records. So this is one of our challenges. So what we have been doing is that we take someone's daughter. If no one in the group is literate, we take someone's daughter in the group as a secretary. So the secretary will come for their meetings to help take notes. So somehow we end up having someone who is not necessarily an original member of the group, but because of the issue of literacy, we are forced to draft in one person who is not an original member, but only comes into, And then the last thing I've already talked about is the issue of dependence on us. Sometimes they still just think that every little step they are taking, they want to ask for direction or ask for your opinion. Yeah, so we have been having a few issues with some of the stakeholders, particularly the government, or the assemblies. I'm sure this is a situation that exists in all places or across Africa. And for many of you, this may not be new, that you go into a community and then you are doing work in a particular community. The assembly comes, or the assembly has something that they want to do, and then they go and do maybe a similar thing without engaging the NGO, maybe for a certain database. And let me say that NGOs provide with reports to the assemblies or update the assemblies on the activities that we do. So in every community that we go to, we first write to the assembly, and then we update them on the progress that we make. So you expect also that when they have something to do, they come and work through you, or they ask for a baseline so that they can be able to build on. But somehow, because of a certain political polarization within our communities, it becomes difficult for the continuation of these activities or working through self-help groups, because if a particular government is in power, there are some people who benefit and not other people. And so it becomes difficult. They disregard the work that you do, And just to say that as much as the local government people must work with us as NGOs, we also need to work with them. There have been times that there has been friction and it becomes difficult to work with the communities. I mean, work with the assemblies. Those frictions have come up, and at least once or twice I have faced that. So let me give an example. I won't mention the specific assembly, but we're doing a training we're engaging youth in climate change a few years ago. And somehow one of the participants who had come for the meeting went to the district assembly, because the district assembly was close to where we were having this engagement with the youth on climate change. Now, the coordinating director met this young man and asked him what he had come to do. Then he said that, oh, they had come to do ABCD. So the coordinating director said that he wanted to be part of what was happening. And then I said that that component of the discussions did not involve anyone. So somehow the young man came back to talk to me about it, but I refused to honor the invitation at the assembly, because I said that there are components that they participate in, but this component was exclusively for the young people, and it was intended to get some kind of views. So we wouldn't want you to bring your rep into that meeting to influence the discussions that we are going to have. So yeah, at least it brought about a few things, but I insisted that they were not going to be there until we were done, and then we could discuss the details. So the last thing to say is that the development space is changing. So once it's changing, it is changing towards sustainability. Because the truth is that the communities, or most communities, are getting tired with the presence of development agents who keep coming to their communities, and yet they are not seeing any change. So it is important for us, especially for the future of NGOs, and in the interest of ensuring the sustainability of our interventions, to begin to work with self-help groups, so that the ownership of whatever initiative remains the people's and not ours, because that will help us ensure that we move towards sustainability. And so we should begin to ask ourselves how we can integrate self-help groups into the work that we do, so that it will align with emerging trends. So thank you very much, and I look forward to your contributions, because I know that you have equally experienced some of these things in your communities.